بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Today I have another reaction video. In this reaction video, I'm going to be reacting to how a tattooed British guy found Islam unexpectedly. So here's the brother going to explain his experiences, how he found Islam, and what made him to revert from Christianity to Islam. Let's get on this video and see the details and explanation of the brother. Let's get to it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hi, my name's Mart, or Martnokizzy on YouTube. I'm 25 from London, and yeah, I'll be sharing my Revert story today. But first, I just want to say thank you to the Muslim Convert Stories channel for allowing me to use their platform to share my story. And yeah, if you find it interesting, you want to hear more, want to follow my journey, then feel free to come over to my channel, subscribe and follow the journey. Yeah, I'm sure Muslim Convert Stories will put the link somewhere, so let's get to it. Seeing the collapse of a secular Western society which stands for nothing and lets liberals walk all over it and its traditional values and morals and beliefs, that was a big wake-up call for me. I was a dating coach in my spare time. I saw how miserable men were living in this dystopian, weird world that we're currently living in the West, where men are women and women are men. And I saw so many women who threw themselves into that whole lifestyle of being a man, you know, having casual encounters, engaging in the hookup culture for some sense of validation, no matter how empty or temporary it was. And every girl that I know who's experienced that has always told me that they suffer from depression and anxiety, but can't seem to figure out why. I saw that the government wanted to control everybody, and that women no longer needed men. And men basically did everything, indirectly or directly, for the sole purpose of attracting women. What kind of purpose is that? I saw the idea of marriage and having a family destroyed whilst hedonism and sexual immorality was being promoted. I saw women who would have been happy wives being encouraged to sell sexually explicit content online. I saw adults encouraging childhood confusion, which resulted in life-changing, life-ruining surgeries. I saw people so obsessed with social media and having clout that they would do anything, including sell their morals, for just a bit of airtime. And I thought to myself, is this not the work of Shaitan? I was raised in London by an atheist father and a Christian mother, and I attended gospel church every single Sunday, and I absolutely hated it. So when my dad gave me the option of stopping Sunday school, stopping going to church, I was so relieved and so happy. And I think from then onwards, I saw atheism as a very positive thing. I saw it in a positive light because, well, it saved me from having to go to Sunday school and having to attend church. For roughly the next 12 years or so, I put feeling good over purpose and morality. At age 13, I started drinking. Age 15, I was getting drunk all the time, almost every weekend at one point, at parties, house parties, or just at the park with my friends. And for those of you who sort of know what happens at house parties, I'll let you figure that one out. So yeah, at such a young age, I lived a life full of hedonism, full of partying, drinking, girls, gambling, experimenting with drugs, a bunch of wild stuff, honestly. And even at that time, I felt there was a certain presence. I didn't quite know what it was, but I consciously ignored it. You know, at the time I was young, I was thinking, I'm having fun. It would be too much effort to try and reel in my behavior. I'm so young, you know. At the peak of my hedonism, I traveled to Portugal to get some tattoos, as you can see. I traveled there with a very sore throat and it hurt a lot. It was very, very tight, but I thought it was tonsillitis. After my sessions of tattooing, I went back to my apartment and I tried to get some sleep. I was there alone. About 3 AM, I woke up and I was in so much pain and I could barely breathe. I went into the bathroom, checked in the mirror. I could barely open my mouth, but from what I could see, my tonsils were almost touching. I did the only thing that I knew to do because I was in a foreign country. I messaged my dad. You know, he's the man who I've always looked up to. He's a man who's saved me in certain situations. He replied instantly, sent me the emergency contact number for the ambulance, which was kind of weird. You know, at the time I didn't think much of it, but looking back, he's never awake at 3 a.m. in the morning. So I called the ambulance and they couldn't really speak any English. You know, it was out of season in Portugal, along with the fact that I could barely open my mouth. So I was basically mumbling the whole time. What was weird in that moment was the fact that even though it was getting harder and harder to breathe, I was extremely calm. And something that I haven't really told anyone, even my closest friends, was that in those moments, I genuinely accepted that I was going to die, which is a strange feeling. On what felt like my last breath, but obviously it wasn't. It was just as my throat was getting tighter and tighter. The guy on the phone said, "Oh, I know where that is," and sent the ambulance. Obviously I was relieved. So they came quite quickly. I was injected several times and given an oxygen mask. The next day I woke up and it was like the movies, you know. I hate to sort of sound cliche, but it was just like the movies where you wake up, the sun is shining, the birds are whistling, and it just, everything is sort of at peace. And when I went to collect my 8 forms of medication, I couldn't believe 8 forms of medication, including like an inhaler, different tablets, crazy. But when I went to collect it, the pharmacy was at the top of a hill and I got the medication. And as I looked down the hill, it was this quite steep road. I could see the sea. And so I walked down towards the beach and I sat down. And in that moment, it's so hard to describe what I felt, especially at the time. I wasn't religious. And so I couldn't explain. And I didn't tell anyone at the time because I just couldn't even explain. But I felt a very strong presence. It was this presence that I had felt throughout my life, but amplified 1,000 times. So I went home and I started researching Christianity again. You know, I was raised Christian, so I had a decent foundation in that and I had a decent amount of knowledge. But as I researched more and more and I wanted answers to certain questions, I couldn't really find answers that really made sense to me. And I think this is quite common with Christian to Muslim reverts. 3 forms of God, the contradictions in the New Testament, the fact that we don't know who the author actually was. Were they there at the time? Probably not. A lot of these things were playing doubts in my mind and I was moving further and further away. And on top of that, I didn't really like the fact that Christians typically let liberals walk all over their religion. This is meant to be your whole world, your whole existence is because of this. And yet you let liberals walk all over it. I didn't like that. I knew that there couldn't be an infinite regression of things. I knew that everything had to start from something. So I knew that I couldn't go back to being an atheist, of course, especially after feeling that I felt. Being an atheist is essentially everything is random. This all happened by chance. You know, there's no real purpose of us being here. We're just sort of here. And is morality objective at that point? So because of all of the sort of confusion with Christianity, that feeling that I felt at the beach sort of got pushed to the back of my mind and my hedonistic activities resumed for a while. Shortly after that, I met a brother who I'm very, very close with now. You know, during lockdown, we would go on walks and we became very, very close. We built a very tight bond. And he taught me about Islam. Over time, he was becoming more and more convincing. I didn't realize at the time that he was, you know, sort of planting the seed. And he told me later on that he was praying for me to revert to Islam, which is nice to hear. Over time, I felt myself getting closer and closer to Islam. It made sense, right? It was very logical, very rational. But at the same time, I was very, very reluctant. And the reason I was reluctant was because, you know, chasing pleasure, essentially having a hedonistic lifestyle, is fun in the moment. And it's something that's hard to let go of. It's hard to change your whole perspective, change your lifestyle into something which, you know, some things aren't that enjoyable. Not everyone wants to do certain things and have some discipline in their life. So I was thinking to myself, like, is this something that I really want to do? On my birthday, the same brother bought me an English translation of the Quran and the prayer mat.
MashaAllah.
And the more that I read, the more that it started to make sense. A lot of my beliefs that I had formed, they started to be sort of pieced together. I never really fit into this sort of liberal world that we live in the West. I never did. You know, I grew up in a house where there was traditional gender roles, and that made sense to me. And seeing all this sort of unnatural stuff being promoted, it it didn't feel good. The more that I read, the more that it made sense, and it was rational, you know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is extremely reasonable in his expectations. And so I started to pray, or at least I learned how to pray. You know, the first time that I walked into a masjid and heard the adhan for the first time, well, in person for the first time, it was an emotional experience. I was definitely overwhelmed in that moment. But you know, the more that I went, the more that I felt the brotherhood. And that is something that you don't see anywhere else other than Islam. Because I guess we love each other for the sake of Allah. Even if we don't necessarily like each other's personality, we love each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For some reason, even at this point, even though I felt connected to Islam, I was so reluctant to revert, and I couldn't understand why. I just carried on doing more and more research. And I think I wanted to not only just have this feeling, this connection with God, I wanted to logically and rationally accept Islam. So I did more research, and you know, the Quran predicted, it told us scientific miracles that were not known 1400 years ago, and modern science has only found these things out about 100 years ago. So certain things like that, the sort of mathematical miracles that I saw in the Quran as well, or that I researched about the Quran, you can't ignore these things. So yeah, after doing my research, I knew that I was Muslim. In my heart, I knew I was Muslim. But I was still reluctant. And the reason why I was reluctant was one big reason, and I think a lot of reverts can relate to this. You know, if I accept Islam, I'm also accepting that my family will not be accepted into Jannah if they continue to live their lives as non-Muslims, most likely. And I had so many emotional chats with my friends about this, and yeah, I think it was the first time that I've seen some of my friends' eyes water, and I'm sure vice versa. But I came to a point where it was a moment of realization that just because I feel sad about something, and just because I don't like a certain aspect of something, doesn't mean that it's not true. And so I thought about it, and I took a step back, and I was just like, the best chances or chance of them entering Jannah is if I lead by example. I'm basically one of their first experiences of a Muslim. And if I act in the right way, if I set an example, you know, positive, you know, always having akhlaq, you know, good manners, having sabr, patience. The Western media has painted Islam and Muslims in such a bad light that it's a tough job to reverse that in someone who isn't Muslim, doesn't really have any Muslim friends. It's a very tough job to do that, but I noticed in the moment, I was just like, this is what I have to do. I'm sure there's a lot of reverts who can relate to that, but that is one of, if not the biggest
True, brother, yeah.
thing to sort of overcome as a revert. I couldn't sleep properly for like 2 weeks. I took my Shahada at London Central Mosque, alhamdulillah. My life has changed so much. I don't want to say I've done a 180 because that would imply that I've basically turned around and started walking backwards. Or walking forwards, but back. But what I want to say is that my life has pivoted. I think, you know, I still want money. I still want success. I still want a family. I still want all of these things. But the reason, the motivation behind it is different. It's not for the approval or attracting women. It's all for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I can provide for my family, so that I can contribute to society, you know, give money, zakat, sadaqah. I can do all of these things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I try my best to keep Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my thoughts, you know. Al-Baqarah 152. I might have gotten that wrong, I'm not gonna lie. Remember me, I will remember you. Try and remember that, and that helps me sort of keep behave, essentially. That's really what helps me. And I try and think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that I do. And obviously as Muslims, I think we should as well. So yeah, I think for those of you who are wondering, I'm no longer a dating coach. This is something I gave up. But I do make videos where I incorporate my life experience, as long as it follows the teachings of Islam. And this is a message I give to all young guys, you know, if you follow the Red Pill movement, and I've made videos on this as well. All of the positive aspects of Red Pill are in Islam. But Islam doesn't have all of the negative sort of sexist aspects of it too. My message to new reverts is it gets easier over time. It really does. You just have to trust in God. And when things aren't going well, you just have to accept it for what it is and say Allahu Alam, because God knows best and this is his plan. And I guess a message to people who are interested in Islam, who are maybe even considering reverting, I would say just research more about Islam. If you take them steps closer to Islam, God will make it easier for you. But yeah, that's my revert story. I have so much more to say, but I'll save that for my channel, inshallah. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening or watching me waffle on for however long this has been. Yeah, if you're interested in my journey, feel free to check out my channel and subscribe. And yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brothers and sisters, the video is ended, and the brother touched very important topics. He said, if I'm a Muslim, all my family cannot go to paradise, which is yeah, the guidance comes from Allah, and no one guides no one. We try to convince people telling the truth. So also the brother, he talk about how he grew up and what he used to do in his young age, which is similar to other Revert stories very much. Okay, brothers and sisters, I have to end this video right here, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.